Imagine a cannonball shattering not just bones, but an entire destiny. The year is 1521, and a young Spanish soldier, wounded in battle, is about to embark on a journey that will forever change the course of history. This is not just another story of overcoming adversity. It is the extraordinary transformation of an ambitious warrior into one of the most influential saints of all time. Chapter 1. The Beginning. Amid the lush green mountains of the Basque Country, a region steeped in nobility and military tradition, a child was born in 1491 who would forever transform the history of the Catholic Church. The young Iñigo López, later known to the world as Saint Ignatius of Loyola, grew up surrounded by tales of chivalry and dreams of glory on the battlefield. Nobility ran in his veins, a legacy of the Loyola family, one of the most influential in the region. Few know that young Iñigo lost his mother shortly after his birth, being raised by his sister-in-law Magdalena, the wife of his elder brother, Martín Garcia, a loss that may explain his relentless pursuit of recognition and achievement. In his youth, Ignatius served as a page in the court of Ferdinand the Catholic, where he learned the arts of diplomacy and warfare. Historical records depict a charming and vain young man, fascinated by duels and romantic escapades, traits he would later recount with regret in his confessions. Among swords and armor, the young soldier developed a notable reputation for bravery and leadership. Documents from the time suggest he had a special talent for quelling disputes among soldiers, a skill that would later prove essential in his spiritual mission. If you're wondering how someone so worldly could transform into one of the most influential saints in history, don't miss our ebook, 50 Saints, Stories and Prayers for Divine Intervention, available in our store. Transformations like Ignatius are just some of the inspiring stories you'll find in this unique collection. Destiny, however, had different plans for this ambitious young soldier. Just as his military career seemed most promising, an unlikely event occurred, one that would change not only his life, but the future of the Church itself. Chapter 2. The Wound That Changed Everything. On May 20th, 1521, the fortress of Pamplona was under siege by French forces that far outnumbered the Spanish defenders. While many officers suggested surrendering, Ignatius, with his characteristic boldness, convinced his comrades to fight to the end, a decision that would alter the course of history. The thunderous roar of a French cannon echoed through the fortress walls. A projectile struck the young commander's legs, shattering his right leg and gravely wounding his left. Years later, witnesses would recount how, even gravely injured, Ignatius maintained his dignity, refusing to show pain in front of his soldiers. Impressed by the young officer's bravery, the French allowed him to be carried on a stretcher to the Loyola castle. The 2-week journey was agony. The bones had been improperly set, and Ignatius, in his vanity, insisted they be broken again to avoid a permanent limp. During his recovery, he endured several surgeries without anesthesia. A little-known detail is that a piece of bone protruding below his knee was sawed off, and he endured the entire procedure without a single cry, clenching his fists tightly instead. Confined to his bed, a man accustomed to action and movement could now only wait. It was during this time that, lacking his beloved books on chivalry, his sister-in-law handed him 2 available works, The Life of Christ and a book about the lives of saints. As he turned the pages, something extraordinary began to happen within him. While his body healed slowly, his soul underwent an even deeper transformation, a spiritual metamorphosis that would lead him to question everything he had believed up until that point. Chapter 3. Convalescence and Conversion. During his long hours of recovery, Ignatius noticed something peculiar. When he fantasized about his former ambitions of military glory and courtly romance, he felt a fleeting pleasure that soon turned to emptiness. However, when he contemplated the idea of imitating the saints he read about, he experienced a lasting and profound joy. In his personal writings, he recounts a decisive moment during his recovery. One night, the Virgin Mary appeared to him holding the Christ child. This vision, little known in detail, had such a profound impact on him that, from that moment on, he vowed to abandon his former life of sin. A fascinating detail is that during his convalescence, Ignatius began taking detailed notes about his spiritual experiences. These notes, written in a small notebook by candlelight, would later become the foundation of his renowned spiritual exercises. As soon as he was able to walk, he made a decision that shocked his noble family. He would leave everything behind to become a pilgrim. His elder brother, trying to avoid the scandal, even threatened him. "I'd rather see you dead than begging in the streets like a madman." But there was no turning back. The former soldier who had dreamed of worldly glories now stripped himself of his fine clothes, donned the simple garb of a penitent, and set off barefoot into the unknown. On his way to Montserrat, he made a stop that would change his life. He donated his sword and dagger to an altar dedicated to Our Lady. The most symbolic moment of this transformation occurred when he spent an entire night in vigil before the altar of Our Lady of Montserrat, replicating the knighting ritual of medieval chivalry, but this time declaring himself a knight of Christ. He left his sword at the altar and embarked on a battle vastly different from those he had known before. Chapter 4. The Spiritual Journey and the Spiritual Exercises. In the small town of Manresa, Ignatius began an unimaginable journey. Living in a cave on the banks of the Cardona River, the ex-soldier who once cared about appearances now begged for food and spent hours in prayer, often forgetting to eat. In manuscripts recently discovered, Ignatius describes an extraordinary mystical experience he had on the banks of the Cardona River. During a moment of contemplation, he claimed to have received such illumination about divine mysteries that all his subsequent mystical experiences combined could not compare to that single moment. Few know that during this time, Ignatius went through a spiritual crisis so profound that he even contemplated suicide. Tormented by scruples and doubts, he went days without eating or sleeping until an inner revelation freed him from this torment. An experience that later enabled him to guide others through similar crises. It was during this period that he began developing a unique method of meditation and spiritual discernment. Ignatius realized that just as physical exercises strengthen the body, there were specific practices that could strengthen the soul. This revolutionary discovery became his greatest legacy. The spiritual exercises were born from his own inner battles. Every meditation, every contemplation was first tested and lived by him before being shared with others. A fascinating detail is that Ignatius developed a coded notation system to record his mystical experiences, using symbols that scholars have only recently begun to decipher. Amid this profound inner transformation, a burning desire grew in his heart to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Little did he know that this journey, which initially seemed to fail in achieving its original goals, would lead him to a far greater purpose: the founding of one of the most influential religious orders in history. Chapter 5. Founding the Society of Jesus. After his failed attempt to remain in Jerusalem, Ignatius made a surprising decision. At the age of 33, he committed himself to studies, sitting alongside children to learn Latin in Barcelona. A noble warrior transformed into a humble student. a sight that provoked both admiration and ridicule among his contemporaries. During his years of study in Paris, Ignatius developed a unique talent: the ability to recognize and bring together extraordinary people. In a small room at the University of Paris, he met Francis Xavier, an ambitious young Basque who initially dismissed him but would later become one of the greatest missionaries in church history. A little-known fact is that the first meeting of the group that would form the Society of Jesus took place in a small underground chapel in Montmartre. On August 15, 1534, Ignatius and his 6 companions took vows of poverty and chastity, unaware that they were planting the seed of a spiritual and educational revolution. The originality of the Society of Jesus initially caused unease within the church. Unlike other religious orders of the time, the Jesuits did not isolate themselves in monasteries or wear distinctive habits. Their mobility and adaptability were revolutionary, traits that reflected the military background of their founder. The first Jesuits faced resistance and suspicion. Ignatius was investigated by the Inquisition several times, but his response always surprised. Instead of defending himself with arguments, he offered his life and works for examination. This radical transparency became a hallmark of the order. During the Jesuits' first missions, Ignatius developed an extraordinarily efficient communication system for the time. He required detailed reports from his missionaries and maintained an extensive correspondence. More than 7,000 of his letters survive today, revealing a leader keenly attentive to every detail of the expanding order. Chapter 6: Legacy and Modern Impact. By the time Ignatius passed away on July 31, 1556, the Society of Jesus had grown to over 1,000 members spread across 12 provinces, from India to Brazil. What began with 7 men in an underground chapel had transformed into a global force for change through education and spirituality. One revolutionary aspect of Ignatius's legacy was his vision for education. In an era when knowledge was a privilege reserved for the elite, he insisted that Jesuit schools should be free and open to all. This decision had a tremendous impact on social mobility at the time and set a precedent that continues to influence education today. Few know that Ignatius was one of the first religious leaders to emphasize the importance of mental health in spiritual life. His guidance on discerning spirits and achieving emotional balance was surprisingly advanced for his time and is studied today by psychologists and therapists alike. The Jesuits became pioneers in various fields of knowledge. From astronomy to linguistics, from the arts to anthropology, the Ignatian method of combining faith and reason produced scientists, artists, and thinkers who transformed our understanding of the world. Even the Big Bang Theory was first proposed by a Jesuit priest, Georges Lemaitre. The influence of Ignatian spirituality transcends Catholicism. His method of finding God in all things and his emphasis on personal discernment inspire people from diverse religious traditions. Even in the corporate world, his principles of leadership and decision-making are studied and applied. Today, the Society of Jesus operates the largest network of Catholic educational institutions in the world, with a presence in over 100 countries. The motto, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, for the greater glory of God, continues to inspire millions of people to find purpose and meaning in their lives, regardless of their vocation. The story of Ignatius of Loyola shows us how the greatest failures can transform into the most remarkable triumphs. From a bed of pain in Loyola to some of the most important universities in the world, his legacy remains vibrant and alive, inspiring millions to find purpose in their own inner battles. In a world increasingly fragmented and confusing, Ignatius's teachings on discernment and the search for meaning are surprisingly relevant. His journey reminds us that the greatest transformations often begin in the most unexpected moments, and that every defeat can mark the start of a far greater victory. If you were inspired by this extraordinary story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more content like this. Share in the comments. What moment from Saint Ignatius's life touched you the most? Was it the turning point that changed his life completely? Or perhaps his perseverance in seeking a greater purpose? May God bless you.